Good morning, I'm Saltwire Weather Specialist Alistair Alders with the latest on Hurricane Fiona. The major hurricane is expected to impact the weather here in Atlantic Canada as we go through tonight and on Saturday. The big change from yesterday is we now have hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings in effect for most of Atlantic Canada, and I will break down just exactly where those warnings are in effect here in just a moment. But let's start with where Fiona is right now. This is Bermuda, and that is the eye of still powerful Fiona passing to the west of Bermuda this morning, bringing very strong winds and heavy rain to that island. As we take a look at the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, still a major Category 3 hurricane as we go throughout the day today and even tonight. Here is about 3 a.m. That is Sable Island. There is the center of what is remaining of Fiona. Then it interacts with that trough we've been talking about all week. And somewhere between Sable Island and landfall, which is now expected in Guysborough County, somewhere near Canso, this will become a post-tropical storm with still hurricane characteristics, likely a weakening Category 2 or even a strong Category 1. As we go throughout the day on Saturday, you can see it slows down Saturday at 3 p.m., the center just north of Cape Breton, and then as we go into Saturday night into Sunday, that center of Fiona moves off towards Labrador. So let's take a look at the warnings that are in effect today. We have a hurricane warning that is in effect for Halifax as well, east towards all of Cape Breton. All of PEI also in that hurricane warning. And we have a tropical storm warning in effect for the western half of Nova Scotia into northern areas, including Amherst, much of New Brunswick, the south and the east of that province. And as well, we have hurricane and tropical storm warnings in effect for parts of western Newfoundland and Labrador. And really, these warnings are going to be in effect as we go over the next several hours. Within those warnings, we also have wind warnings for all of Nova Scotia, PEI, and as well most of New Brunswick, and as well the west and south coasts of Newfoundland, where peak wind gusts of 90 to 120 are expected, except 120 to 150 plus for eastern maritime regions, so Cape Breton, the eastern half of mainland Nova Scotia, PEI, and as well the southwest corner of Newfoundland. We also have rainfall warnings that are in effect for much of Nova Scotia, the southeast corner of New Brunswick, all of PEI, and you can see the very southwest tip of Newfoundland in Port aux Basques. So let's take a look at the steering mechanism for Fiona. That's the center there. This is the trough that we've been talking about all week that's going to steer the storm, and watch this. Here's Fiona approaching, interacting with that trough, and then it all becomes one. It's just going to be a very powerful storm, a serious storm for parts of Atlantic Canada, so it does need to be taken very seriously as we go through the upcoming weekend. Take a look at the rainfall outlook that we are expecting for Atlantic Canada. Not much has changed with this rainfall outlook. About 50 to 100 millimeters of rain expected anywhere from parts of the south shore of Nova Scotia into Halifax north to Amherst, and really the eastern half of Prince Edward Island as you make your way into Cape Breton. And within those areas, pockets of 150 to 200 millimeters are possible. That is most likely for the eastern half of Nova Scotia, parts of Cape Breton, and as well the eastern tip of Prince Edward Island. In Newfoundland and Labrador, this is not going to be a major rain event. It will be for the southwest corner of the province, so between Burgeo and Port aux Basques, where we could see 75 to over 100 millimeters of rain. But in St. John's, this is not going to be a major rain event at all, likely below 15 millimeters. And as you make your way up into Labrador, we also have some rain that will fall there, and even the possibility of some wet snow, and I will show you that on the timeline here in a moment. Let's take a look at the wind gusts as we go throughout the day today. You can see here we are at about 8 o'clock tonight, and those winds do begin to pick up as we go through the evening and into the overnight hours. But it's as that center of Fiona approaches to our south that we really start to see the strongest winds move into the area. Possibly up to 120. This model might be a bit high for Halifax, but really up to 120, possibly locally higher gusts are possible here in Halifax. Generally in the range of 70 to 90 for the southwest corner of Nova Scotia. And then the eastern half of Nova Scotia, that is where we're looking at gusts. You can see in Summerside, PEI, 130 up to 150, 130 in Sydney. So that is a very powerful wind gust. Here we are at about 7 a.m. But notice Port Hawkesbury a bit lower As that center of Fiona approaches, there will likely be a bit of calm near that center, so don't be surprised if for parts of eastern Nova Scotia the winds do ease somewhat. As we go throughout the day, the winds do remain strong across all of the Maritimes region, strongest though for the eastern half of Nova Scotia and as well Prince Edward Island. It's not until we go into Saturday night that you really start to see the winds taper off. Here we are early Sunday. And as that center of Fiona moves towards the north, that's when we will start to see those strongest winds begin to ease. For Newfoundland and Labrador, this will also be a strong wind event across the island. However, the strongest winds will be in the southwest corner of that province, where you can see Burgeo, Port aux Basques expecting the strongest winds, but still St. John's is going to get into some gusty winds near 60 kilometers per hour. You can see up to 80 in Corner Brook. That's the eye of Fiona right there, so it's very visible on our modeling. And as we go into Sunday, that center moves into Labrador and things start to ease. Now, the other big concern with Fiona is going to be the large waves and the potential for storm surge. So here we are early on Saturday. That's the center of Fiona there. And this is wave heights that could go anywhere from 9 to maybe 14 plus meters on the coast of eastern Cape Breton. Generally 7 to 12 for the eastern shore into Cape Breton, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a bit higher, so there's definitely the risk of storm surge and localized flooding for those areas. Also take note the north coast of Prince Edward Island. That's where we could see wave heights that may go anywhere from 5 to 8 meters. So there is, of course, a very high concern for coastal erosion on the north coast of Prince Edward Island. We also get into some large waves on the southwestern tip of Newfoundland. Back towards Halifax, those waves will be a bit lower, but still likely in a range of 3 to 6 or 7 meters. And then into the southwest corner of Nova Scotia, those waves likely near 3 meters. So not necessarily a major event for those regions. Let's break it down though more with your weather timeline. And here's Saturday morning. This is the eye of Fiona, the transitioning storm moving over the area. So we have rain at times heavy across all of Nova Scotia, across all of Prince Edward Island, most of New Brunswick, and you can see that rain is moving into Newfoundland as well. As we go throughout the day, you can see that Fiona does start to gradually pull towards the north. The rain tapers off first in New Brunswick and the southwest corner of Nova Scotia, and as we go through Saturday evening into the overnight hours, that rain pulls out of Nova Scotia. Still going to be a rain story for Sunday in Newfoundland, but look at that. That is wet snow mixing in for Nain and parts of Labrador City. So really, Fiona has a true mix of everything with this storm. Conditions do improve as we go throughout the day. Here are a few things to know, maybe the key points with Fiona. The strongest winds will be over eastern Nova Scotia as well as PEI in southwestern Newfoundland, 120 to 150 plus kilometer per hour wind gusts. The heaviest rain also in those areas, 100 to 150 plus, maybe local amounts near 200. The wave and storm surge concern, 7 to 12 plus meter waves for eastern Nova Scotia, as well as Cape Breton and southwestern Newfoundland. And of course, be prepared for this storm. Severe and devastating damage is possible, really, unfortunately, for a large portion of the Maritimes and potentially into parts of southwestern Newfoundland. This storm definitely needs to be taken seriously. Now, we've had a few questions about Hurricane Fiona, so let's answer those now. The first is, will this be the strongest storm on Canadian record? There's been a lot of chatter about this, and Fiona does have the potential to be the strongest storm on Canadian record. We do have the central pressure record in Canada near 940 millibars, and it's possible that Fiona could be near 930 or lower. So this will be a very intense storm as it makes landfall in Nova Scotia. The next question is, what is the difference between a tropical storm warning and a hurricane warning? It essentially has to do with the wind speed criteria. Tropical storm force winds are lower, 63 to 118 plus kilometers per hour. The hurricane warning is 119 to usually around 140, 150 kilometers per hour. So that's the main difference. And of course, within tropical storms and hurricanes, you have the threat of heavy rain and as well storm surge. The final question is, does a hurricane rain salt water? Because of course these storms move over the ocean. And the answer is no. So of course hurricanes get their fuel from the ocean, but these storms evaporate the water from the ocean, leaving the salt, so this does rain as pure water. If you're near a coastline where we could have large waves and storm surge, it's possible that some of that salty water is mixing in with the rain, but a hurricane does not truly rain salt water. So that is the latest on Hurricane Fiona. Keep it locked to saltwire.com. We will have the latest on Fiona as we go through the upcoming weekend.